Hey guys, Tony Bonvecchio from the Strength House. Today I'm going to talk about a really common myth that we hear all the time, and that's that you shouldn't push your knees forward over your toes while squatting. Now, why are people afraid of pushing their knees forward? Because it increases shear stress at the knee. What's shear stress? Shear stress simply means that the further you push your knees over your toes, the more stress that's created at the front of the knee joint. And people with existing knee pain will often have that pain feel worse as they push their knees forward more. So if you have an existing knee injury, be careful about pushing your knees forward. Maybe you shouldn't be squatting in the first place. If you don't have an existing knee injury, there's nothing inherently wrong with pushing the knees over the toes. And in fact, it's probably the most optimal way to squat, and I'm going to show you why. So first things first, I'm going to show you what a squat looks like with really vertical shins. If you want to keep your shins vertical during a squat, you have to do two things. You have to sit back a lot, which makes it hard to stay upright, which you can see if I'm holding a goblet squat here, a kettlebell in a goblet position. It's very hard for me to stay upright with vertical shins. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I feel like I'm gonna fall forward and dump that kettlebell forward. The other thing is, in order to squat below parallel with a vertical shin, you have to stand probably pretty wide, and a lot of people simply just don't have the hip flexibility or the right hip anatomy, aka their hips just aren't shaped well for doing really wide squats. And most people who have no interest in powerlifting probably shouldn't be squatting with a stance this wide. So for me to sit back and break parallel like so, I have to stand quite wide. So that's just not a great option for the average gym goer or the person who just doesn't care about squatting hundreds and hundreds of pounds. Now, squat with the knees that travel forward a little bit is a squat with good balance over the midfoot, and it's much easier to stay upright. I'm going to show you what that looks like. So if I take more of a moderate stance, and I'm just holding the kettlebell in a goblet position here, I don't want to break at the hips first and sit way back. I also don't want to completely break at the knees first either. I want my hips and my knees to move at the same time. That's just going to create a little bit of forward knee travel. As I get to the bottom here, you'll see that my knees are over my toes a little bit, not excessively, but I have really good balance over my midfoot. And something also to note here too, is that with my calf and my hamstring touching here, I have a lot of support for my knee. Those hamstrings are kind of like a big comfy pillow for my knees. It's going to give that joint some support there. So by pushing the knees forward just a little, I get that hamstring to kind of cushion the knee as I go down. Another really important thing to note is that if you're unable to push your knees forward because your ankles are really stiff, that could result in a compensation that's actually way worse for your knees. I'm going to show you what that looks like. So dorsiflexion is the ability for the shin and the foot to get closer together via the ankle joint. If I don't have good ankle dorsiflexion range of motion, my body will compensate and get that motion by having my weight roll to my insteps and having my knees cave in. So if I can't push my knees forward very well, say I run out of room here, the way that my body is going to get lower without me even really trying is to start to roll to my insteps, and then my knees are going to cave in. And we just kind of inherently know this is a bad position for our knees to be in. So if we can't do this very well, we're going to start to do this. And I would argue that this is a much worse position for your knees to be in over the long haul if you squat over and over and over with your ankles collapsing in and then your knees coming in, than if your knees push forward over your toes. So if you're not able to push the knees forward, that's a problem in and of itself. Now, with all that said, we think it's a great idea for a lot of people to squat with just a modest heel elevation. That could be a squat shoe where you have a 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch heel that lets you push your knees forward a bit more readily. We also have a ramp right here that we like to use with a lot of our athletes who don't necessarily want to be squatting in squat shoes. So I'm going to show you what this looks like. I'm just going to stand on the ramp with my toes still on the floor and the rest of my foot on the ramp. What you'll see here is that it's very, very easy for me to stay nice and upright, push my knees forward gently, get those calves to touch the hamstrings so I get good knee support there. And it's very easy for me to maintain balance over my midfoot and not collapse into my insteps. If you look at that bottom position, it's just a very good looking squat, nice and upright, balance over the midfoot. My knees are pushed forward, but not excessively. And if you squat like that with the knees over the toes to a reasonable degree, you're probably not going to run into knee pain in the long haul, and you're going to have a much better looking squat. You're going to get stronger, you're going to build more muscle in your lower half, and you really don't need to worry about pushing the knees forward over the toes. So if you don't have a pre-existing knee injury, Knees over toes is actually the best way to squat.